Project Bill here, and just know this video might be racist, sexist, and whatever else there is to be a shitty person or whatever. And due to the fact that Deku will get folded by the villains and main cast 9 times out of 10 for his arrogance alone, I will kindly give him a power-up, which will be a good quirk of course. And this quirk will be Simple Copy, which allows him to copy any quirk as long as it has a simple process of activation and deactivation. And the limit of how many quirks Izuku can copy is none, but remember, it has to be simple, that's all. And if you guys can think of a better name, then drop it in the comments. But now, let's stop yapping and begin What If Deku Was Toxic? And we start this story in Japan, Musutafa City, and to a 15-year-old Izuku as he was in a bus which was heading to the UA entrance exam, as Izuku reminisced about his shitty life up to this point. And this is where we now do a flashback to Izuku's life, and Izuku's birth was normal, except in his scenario, Inko went to get the milk instead of Hisashi in this timeline, and that made Hisashi the caretaker of Izuku, and for the following years, Hisashi did a shit job at it. And due to Izuku being, well, born as a toxic person, this would make the downfall on his personality even quicker, and Izuku, well, never made any friends because of his, well, personality, which right now, as a kid, is, well, overconfidence, bossing people around, and not letting any girls play with him and the boys. And Izuku at age 4 got his quirk checked, which is what I said it was, and he gloated a lot about it after he unlocked it. And the first quirk he copied was Hisashi's fire-breathing quirk, which was okay. But in the following years, Izuku hanged around with the bad crowd of people, and seeing a shit father when he comes back home and a fucking idiot when he is at school, and that fucking idiot is Katsuki Bakugo, and with their personalities being, well, based on ego, Izuku and Bakugo would be in many fights, and Izuku winning every time because of his much calmer approach in the art of throwing hands, and Bakugo feeling rage every time he lost. And to add icing to the cake, Izuku obviously copied Bakugo's explosion quirk, which made Bakugo pissed no end. But he could not do anything to Izuku because Izuku was better than him in every way. But Bakugo would never say this out loud. But in the following years, Izuku was the king of his school, and not completely annoying, but more like a shitty person who is not annoying. And while he does talk jack shit about women, he does not hit them at the very least, unless they get in his way, of course, because anyone who gets in his way will be slapped away to the Shadow Realm. But Izuku had also done many other things as well than being a king at school and alone at home, and that is copying as many useful quirks as he can, and he copied a lot of them, and the ones he uses right now are explosion, fire breathing, a levitation quirk from a random girl, a teleportation quirk from also another girl, a flashbang type of quirk, and lastly a quirk that allows him to get faster the more he does the same move, also copied from a girl. And if you're wondering any quirk Izuku copied from a girl, he remembers their name, because Izuku knows he is just using their quirks better than they ever could use. And those 5 are the only quirks for now, because most quirks take a little too complex of a start, or are just plain weak. But Izuku at the age of 13 had ran away from Hisashi because, well, he did not want to do anything with Hisashi, and these following years has been annoying enough to deal with him. And so Izuku ran away, and the cops were never called because Hisashi preferred Izuku to not be in the house, so there was no loss. And Bakugo becoming the king of the school after Izuku left. And Izuku in the following 2 years was able to live alone in Hosu City. Yes, he walked to Hosu City, and with his intelligence and cunningness, he got a good job and lied about his age to get it, obviously, because Izuku knows he is valuable, and lying is just one thing for him to even more valued. And that's how Izuku got a job and lived for the following 2 years. And this is where the flashback ends, and we now get to Izuku still in the bus, as the bus stopped and Izuku got out of there and paid. And after a little more walking, Izuku was now in front of the UA entrance exam, as Izuku stood in front of the massive UA gates, hands in his pockets, looking at the building like he already owned the place. To him, this wasn't an exam, it was just a formality before he took his spot at the top of the hero world. As Izuku walked, some kid with glasses and engines in his legs was hovering around, looking all nervous and serious. Izuku just scoffed. "Move it, Four Eyes. You're blocking the path of someone who actually matters," Izuku said, not even looking at Tenya Ida as he brushed past him. Ida started chopping his arms around, yapping about respect and academic decorum, but Izuku just tuned him out. To Izuku, everyone here was just a background character in his story. Then the fucking idiot himself showed up. Katsuki Bakugo was stomping towards the entrance, looking like he wanted to blow up the entire city block. When his eyes landed on Izuku, his face turned a lovely shade of purple. "You, Deku, what the hell are you doing here?" Bakugo screamed, sparks already flying from his palms. Izuku didn't even stop walking. He just looked over his shoulder with a smirk that would make a saint want to punch him. "Oh, look, the loser from middle school is still loud. Careful, Bakugo, if you keep screaming, you might actually pop a blood vessel before the gates even open, and we both know how it ends when you try to fight me. You hit the floor, and I stay standing. Simple as that." Bakugo looked like he was about to explode, literally and figuratively, but the UA staff started ushering everyone into the orientation hall. Izuku sat through Present Mike's whole "yeah" routine with a look of pure boredom. While everyone else was sweating over the points and the giant robots, Izuku was just checking his mails. "Giant tin cans? That's the big challenge?" Izuku whispered to himself. "This is going to be a slaughter." When they finally got to the training grounds, Izuku stood at the front of the crowd. A girl next to him, the one with the brown bob hair he'd seen earlier, looked like she was trying to calm her nerves, which we know is Ochako. "Hey, good luck," Ochako said, trying to be nice. Izuku didn't even look at her. "Keep your luck. You're going to need it way more than I will just to stay in the top 50. Just stay out of my way so I don't accidentally fold you along with the robots." Ochako flinched, her face falling, but Izuku didn't care. The buzzer went off, and before Present Mike could even say start, Izuku was already a blur. He didn't wait for the gates to fully open. He used that levitation quirk he'd swiped years ago to vault over the wall, leaving the rest of the extras in the dust. He hit the ground running, and as a three-pointer robot rolled towards him, Izuku didn't even slow down. He raised his hand and a massive explosion, the very one he'd perfected by watching Bakugo fail, ripped through the robot's chest, sending scraps of metal into the air. "One," Izuku muttered, his eyes already searching for the next victim. "This is almost too easy," Izuku said as he started teleporting around Sector and to the robot's weak spots and using an explosion there for a quick elimination. And in the following 5 minutes, Izuku did this simple yet effective technique on the robots and gaining over 100 points from it already, until the ground started shaking as Nezu had pressed the big red button, summoning the zero-pointer robot as everyone started to run away from it. And Izuku ignored it until he heard a girly scream and sighed, looking around to where he heard the scream, as his eyes landed on the same girl that tried to good luck to Izuku, and if he remembered correctly, her name was Ochako, and right now the zero-pointer robot was closing in on her, about to crush her, until Izuku got on top of the zero-pointer, and then teleported himself and the zero-pointer to the sky, and then teleported back down to Ochako and easily destroyed the rubble that trapped her as he teleported himself and her to a building as he left her there. As Izuku looked to see the zero-pointer robot crashing down onto the ground, being destroyed from the fall, he smirked slightly and looked back to Ochako and then down at her. "I guess your face makes up for your uselessness right here," Izuku said, instantly teleporting away as they were 4 minutes and 30 seconds remaining after he had dealt with that zero-pointer in 30 seconds, as he started destroying more robots, as we now get to UA's observation room. In the observation room, the atmosphere was a mix of awe and pure discomfort. The teachers, the top heroes in Japan, sat in the dimly lit room, their faces illuminated by the dozens of screens flickering with Izuku's rampage. "He's efficient," Vlad noted, crossing his arms, "but his attitude, it's corrosive." "He just teleported a zero-pointer into the stratosphere," Midnight added, leaning forward with a frown. "That's not just efficient, that's terrifying. But did you hear what he said to that girl? Your face makes up for your uselessness? Who raised this kid?" Nezu, the principal, sipped his tea, his beady eyes tracking Izuku as he blinked across the screen, dismantling a two-pointer with a casual backhand explosion. He possesses an incredible analytical mind to utilize copied quirks with such mastery. However, he lacks the one thing we usually look for, a heart. He saved her, All Might chimed in, though his voice lacked its usual booming confidence. He was staring at the screen where Izuku had just abandoned Ochako on a roof. He saved her, but he did it like he was taking out the trash. There was no heroism in it, just arrogance. Eraserhead, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke. He's a logic-driven monster. He saved her because letting a student die during an exam would be a hassle for his own career. Look at him, he isn't even sweating. Yes, we all saw that, Aizawa-kun, and don't destroy all of that. Aizawa's eye twitched. Get changed. Your curriculum starts tomorrow. And Midoriya, my office after school. We need to talk about your interpersonal skills. Sure, why not? Izuku said, not really caring about this, while Bakugo was trembling, his knuckles white as he clutched his PE uniform. He had watched Izuku systematically dismantle every record, using a cocktail of quirks that Izuku hadn't even worked for, or so it seemed to Katsuki. The fact that Izuku had generously copied Kirishima's hardening just to face-tank a robot and then mocked Momo's creation by calling it a glorified 3D printer for losers was the final straw. You damn thief, Bakugo snarled, stepping into Izuku's path as the class headed toward the locker rooms. You think you're the king because you can copy a few moves? You're nothing but a fake. Izuku stopped, leaning his head back and looking down his nose at Bakugo with that insufferable half-lidded gaze. A fake? That's rich coming from the guy who's been stuck in second place since we were 4. I don't just copy quirks, Katsuki, I refine them. I took your explosion and made it a shaped charge. I took Uraraka's zero gravity and used it to bypass air resistance. I'm not a thief, I'm an upgrade. You're just the beta version. Bakugo lunged at Izuku, about to shoot an explosion at him until Izuku's eyes glowed red, his hair going up as he used Aizawa's erasure quirk, and Bakugo's explosion quirk was erased. I don't need to touch anyone to copy a quirk. I just did that because I can, Izuku said, smiling as Bakugo froze mid-lunge, his palms producing nothing but the pathetic sound of dry skin rubbing together. His eyes went wide as he stared at Izuku, whose hair was floating and eyes were glowing with the familiar, predatory red light. My quirk, Bakugo whispered, his voice cracking for the first time. What did you do? I told you, didn't I? I'm an upgrade, Izuku said, his voice a low, dangerous purr. He deactivated the erasure quirk, letting his hair fall back into its messy green curls. I saw the teacher use it once. Simple process of activation. Sight. I don't even need to touch you to turn you into a quirkless loser, Katsuki. I just have to look at you. And frankly, looking at you is the hardest part of my day. Izuku turned his back on Bakugo, the ultimate sign of disrespect, and started walking toward the changing rooms again. Don't lunge at me again. Next time, I won't just erase your quirk. I'll use that hardening I took from the redhead to turn your jaw into dust. As the rest of the class, who had been lingering near the entrance, scrambled to get out of his way, Kirishima looked conflicted. He liked the power, but the vibe was definitely unmanly. Momo was clutching her arm, still reeling from being called a 3D printer for losers. The office meeting, round 2. As Aizawa sat in his office, his eyes bloodshot from overusing his quirk earlier, when Izuku sauntered in, looking entirely too pleased with himself, Aizawa didn't even tell him to sit. You copied my quirk, Aizawa stated. It wasn't a question. I did, Izuku said, leaning against the doorframe. It's a good one, simple, effective. I think I can hold it longer than you can, though. My eyes don't seem to get as dry. Must be a skill issue on your end, Teach. Aizawa's capture scarf twitched. That quirk is a burden. If you use it recklessly, you'll become a target. But that's not why you're here. You're here because you're a liability to the team dynamic. All Might is running the battle trials tomorrow. If you pull that parasite stunt during a live combat exercise, I'll have you in detention until you graduate. Teams are for people who can't handle the heavy lifting themselves, Izuku scoffed. But fine, I'll play your little game. Just don't expect me to be nice about it. And this is where we now jump cut to Class 1A and the next day until suddenly, I am coming through the door like a normal person. All Might said, bursting through the door and getting inside Class 1A and his Silver Age consume, as everyone except Izuku started to glaze him and shit until All Might stated that the clothes make the pros. And then he pressed a button which showed everyone their hero outfits, as everyone took theirs and after changing went to Ground Gamma, as Izuku was wearing Naoya's clothes, as no one made a comment about it because they're a little afraid of Izuku, while All Might explains about the 2v2 heroes versus villain Mark battles, and the first round is between the villains Katsuki and Shoto Todoriko versus the heroes Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka. And after Bakugo heard that, he was salivating at the thought of finally putting Izuku in his place, while Todoriko still had his daddy issues, as they both went to the bomb room, while Izuku and Ochako got to their designated area. As Ochaka twiddled with her fingers, she decided to say something, but Izuku stopped her. "Don't talk, girl. Let me handle it while you can watch the show," Izuku said, petting her head as if Ochaka was a dog, as Ochaka flinched, but Izuku did not really care. But after a few minutes later, All Might gave the go and Izuku instantly activated his levitation quirk, levitating to one floor and another, seeing if the bomb is there as hearing Bakugo coming down, as he ignored that and looked until he got to the fifth and opened the window seeing Todoriko face to face. As Izuku quickly activated Erasure and kicked Todoriko away, and then looked at the bomb which was encased in ice, as Izuku sighed for a second and started shaking his hand left and right as his speed started to go higher and higher, while Todoriko was unable to do anything because his quirk was erased, as Izuku punched the frozen bomb and the ice shattered into a million pieces. As Izuku then touched the bomb, as All Might said, "Hero team wins," and Izuku hearing that smirked while looking at Todoriko. "I rate your quirk 8 out of 10, but the sad thing is I can't copy it because it's kind of like two separate quirks. But in the end, you gotta let it go," Izuku said as he teleported back to the waiting room, leaving Todoriko stunned, while Bakugo, who was now at the ground floor in front of Ochaka, as he cursed out Izuku's name, while Ochako also went back to the waiting room as Izuku was already air. As Izuku leaned against the wall of the monitoring room, the rest of Class 1A gave him a wide berth. The atmosphere was suffocating. He had just dismantled the two strongest prodigies in the class without breaking a sweat or even using a flashy move. As All Might stood at the console, his hands trembling slightly. Young Midoriya, while your speed and efficiency were remarkable, you completely abandoned your partner and showed total lack of concern for the structural integrity of the building or your opponent's safety." Safety? This is a hero course, not a daycare. Todoriko relied on a wall like a toddler with a security blanket. I removed the blanket. And as for Ochaka, he spared a glance at the brunette as she walked in, looking dejected. "She didn't get hurt, did she? That's more than she could have guaranteed for herself." "But you didn't even use a plan," Iyata barked as he returned from the building with a bruised ego. "Strategy is the hallmark of a great hero." "My strategy was winning," Izuku said, finally looking at Iyata. "Your strategy was moving furniture. Tell me, Iyata, when a villain is teleporting behind you to nuke a city block, are you going to ask him to wait while you fix your glasses? You're all playing house. I'm playing for keeps." Bakugo stomped into the room then, smelling of burnt ozone and pure hatred. He didn't scream this time. He was vibrating with a quiet, lethal rage that was far more dangerous. He marched straight up to Izuku, but the green-haired teen just tilted his head, his eyes flashing red for a split second, a silent reminder that he could turn Bakugo into a normal person whenever he felt like it. "I'm going to kill you," Bakugo hissed, low enough that only Izuku could hear. "I don't care about the points. I'm going to find the one quirk you can't copy, and I'm going to shove it down your throat." "I'd love to see you try, Katsuki, but let's be honest, you're just the opening act. I'm already looking at the main event." His eyes drifted to Todoriko, who was standing in the corner, staring at his left hand in a daze. While we now jump cut to the aftermath at lunch break, and in the cafeteria, Izuku sat alone at a table meant for 10. Nobody dared to sit with him, which was exactly how he liked it. He was busy scrolling through his phone, looking at footage of pro heroes, mentally cataloging which quirks had simple activation triggers he could snatch later. Suddenly, a tray clattered down opposite him. It was Ochaka. She looked determined, though her hands were shaking. "I'm not a dog," she said, her voice small but firm. "I could have fooled you. You followed me here, didn't you?" "I'm here to tell you that I'm going to get stronger," she said, ignoring his bite. "And one day, you're going to have to rely on me. You think being alone makes you a king, but it just makes you a target." Izuku finally locked eyes with her. The Naoya-style smirk returned, wider and more toxic than ever.
A target, honey. For someone to hit a target, they have to be able to see it. I'm so far above you that you're just a speck on the horizon. But hey, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a mock whisper. I like this spirit. It'll be much more fun when I eventually have to remind you of your place, again. He turned his back on Ochaka, the ultimate sign of disrespect, and started walking toward the changing rooms again. Don't lunge at me again. Next time, I won't just erase your quirk. I'll use that hardening I took from the redhead to turn your jaw into dust. Even I'm laughing at my own jokes, which most of the time means I have zero friends, but back to the story. And this is where we now jump cut to a week later, as the class was loaded onto a bus for the unforeseen simulation joint. Izuki sat in the very back, eyes closed, ignoring Asui's comment about his villainous quirk. As they stepped into the massive dome, 13 began her speech about the dangers of quirks. Izuku was about to let out another bored yawn when the fountain in the center of the plaza began to sputter. A black, misty void opened, and a pale man covered in severed hands stepped out, followed by a literal army of thugs and a monstrous bird-like creature with its brain exposed. Is this part of the training? Kirishima asked, stepping forward. Stay back, Aizawa shouted, his goggles snapping into place. Those are real villains. While the rest of the class panicked, Izuku's eyes lit up. He wasn't scared, he was hungry. He looked at the mist man, Kuragiri, and the hand guy, Shigaraki, and then at the beast. Finally, Izuku whispered, a dark, manic energy swirling in his chest. Some high-quality brushes for my collection. He didn't wait for Aizawa's orders. Before the villains could even finish their grand introduction, Izuku had already activated teleportation and appeared 10 feet from Shigaraki. Hey, hand job, that bird thing looks expensive. Mind if I take it for a test drive? Shigaraki's neck craned.
Instead, he saw his students standing on the upper levels, mostly unharmed, and Izuku Midoriya standing in the middle of the plaza over the bodies of the two lead villains. As All Might deflated, literally and figuratively, the tension left his body as he walked down the stairs, his eyes wide. Young Midoriya? Did you do this? Izuku turned his head, giving the #1 hero a look of pure, unadulterated boredom. You're late, old man. The show's over. I already took the only thing worth having here. He held up his hand, and for a second, a gray, crumbling energy flickered around his fingertips. Decay. It's a bit crude, Izuku noted, deactivating the quirk with a shrug. But in the hands of someone who actually knows how to use it, it's a masterpiece. You should probably call the cops. The hand job is starting to drool on the pavement. The rest of the class, Bakugo, Todoroki, and the others, finally made it down to the plaza. They stared at the ash, then at Izuku. Bakugo looked like he was going to vomit from the sheer weight of his own inadequacy. Todoroki just watched Izuku with a new, haunting realization. The gap between them wasn't a gap, it was an ocean. He's a monster, Mineta whispered, hiding behind Asui. Izuku heard him. He didn't turn around, but his voice carried through the silent dome. I'm not a monster, Mineta. I'm the only person in this room who isn't a victim. Learn the difference before the next time someone tries to kill you. As the ambulances arrived and the teachers began the debrief, Izuku walked past All Might without a second glance. Izuku, All Might called out, his voice shaking. We need to talk about that quirk you took. It's dangerous. It's the quirk of a killer. Izuku stopped, looking over his shoulder with that signature soul-crushing smirk. Every quirk is the quirk of a killer, All Might. It just depends on who's holding the brush. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a dry cleaning appointment. This suit was expensive, Izuku said as he teleported away. And this is where we now jump cut to a week later, and in this week, UA High was shut down for a week to deal with the press and blah blah blah. The week ends and everyone comes back to UA High only to be informed about the UA Sports Festival. And obviously, everyone signed up for it. While there was something else going on, which is that the Heroes Public Safety Commission had a talk about Izuku, and we now jump cut to where they are. As the conference room of the Hero Public Safety Commission, HPSC, was colder than a morgue. A dozen high-ranking officials sat around a sleek black table, the only light coming from the massive digital display showing Izuku Midoriya's combat logs from the USJ incident. He didn't just neutralize the threat, he harvested it. He walked into a battlefield and treated the villains like a buffet.
The boy is a wild card, a stern-faced man added, leaning into the light. He's currently holding erasure, explosion, zero gravity, hardening, creation, and now decay. That's a lethal combination that rivals the power output of the top 10 heroes combined, and he's 15. The concern isn't just the power, the chairwoman of the HPSC said, her voice dropping the temperature in the room by another 10 degrees. It's the personality. He shows no empathy, no desire for heroism in the traditional sense, and a blatant disregard for authority. He mocked All Might to his face. If he decides the law is a hassle, who's going to stop him? We could place him under special supervision, someone suggested. Train him like we did Lady Nagant or Hawks. The chairwoman let out a dry, mirthless laugh. Hawks was a child we could mold. Midoriya is already a finished product. He's too smart to be a puppet and too arrogant to be a soldier. For now, we watch the sports festival. Let's see how he handles being the center of the world's attention. If he goes too far, we'll have to consider more permanent measures. And this is where we now get back to the UA, as the news of the sports festival hit Class 1A like a lightning bolt. Everyone was vibrating with energy. Kirishima was hardening his fists, Mino was dancing, and Ito was giving a speech about the sanctity of athletic competition. Izuku sat in his usual spot, feet back on the desk, staring out the window. He hadn't said a word since he walked in. The class had learned that a quiet Izuku was almost more terrifying than a talking one. "Hey, Midoriya," Kirishima said, trying to bridge the gap with his usual manliness. "You're going to go all out, right? I mean, after the USJ, everyone is going to be watching you." Izuku didn't turn his head. "Watching me? They'll be lucky if they can keep track of me." And Kirishima, "Yeah? Don't get your hopes up. This isn't a competition for the rest of you. It's a showcase for me. You're just the background extras helping the ratings." Bakugo, who had been brooding in the front row, slammed his hands on his desk. Boom! "Shut up, Deku. I don't care what you stole. I'm going to crush you in front of the whole damn country." Izuku finally turned, that Naoya-style smirk creeping onto his face. "Katsuki, you're like a loud commercial nobody asked for, annoying, predictable, and easily skipped." He stood up, the chairs scraping against the floor. "I'm going to make you a promise. I won't use explosion during the entire festival. I don't want people thinking I need your mediocre power to win." Izuku stated, but this is where we now jump cut to the UA Sports Festival. The stadium was packed. Tens of thousands of people were screaming, the air thick with the smell of popcorn and anticipation. President Mike's voice boomed over the speakers, hyping up the crowd as the students of Class 1A walked out onto the field. And here they are, the class that survived the villain attack, Class 1A. As they stood in the center, Midnight stepped up to the podium as the referee. "Time for the student pledge from Class 1A, the student who placed first in the entrance exam, Izuku Midoriya." The crowd roared. Izuku sauntered up to the microphone, his hands in his pockets, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He leaned into the mic, and the entire stadium went dead silent. "I could give a grand speech and say a lot of heroic things, but really, everyone prefers honesty, so I will be honest," Izuku said, while in from one of the watching booths, Aizawa and Nezu sighed, already knowing something controversial is about to open when Izuku opens his mouth. And this is where we now get back to Izuku. "I am here to be a hero for the fame, money, and power. And yeah, while I will save your something not so worthless lives, I don't really care in the end. And another thing I want to say is that women should be 3 steps behind a man. And a last thing I want to say is that don't even try to fuck with me. All of you people can do is just talk in the internet or news about how bad of a person I am, but never, and I mean never, come in front of me and say it to me, because all of you are weak." Izuku smiling and his signature Naoya smile. The stadium didn't just go silent, it turned into a vacuum. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the wind whistling through the rafters. Then the explosion of noise was deafening. Thousands of people were on their feet, screaming in outrage. Pro heroes in the stands were jaw-dropped. The HPSC officials in the private booth were already reaching for their phones to kill the live feed. Did he just... President Mike's voice cracked over the speakers. That was certainly an honest pledge.
Izuku Midoriya, everybody, the boy who apparently hates the internet and decorum. Midnight looked like she wanted to whip him off the stage, but Izuku just stepped down with a casual, bored grace, ignoring the trash and plastic bottles being hurled from the lower stands. He walked past a trembling Momo Yaoyorozu, who looked like she was about to cry from the sheer, casually delivered misogyny, and a fuming Ochika Uraka. 3 steps behind, huh? Ochika hissed as Izuku passed. Izuku didn't even slow down. You're lucky I let you be on the same track, girl. Don't ruin the view with that face. Izuku said, "Well, this is where we now get to the obstacle race." Start, Midnight screamed, her voice desperate to move the event along before a riot broke out. The bottleneck at the tunnel was a disaster. Todoroki immediately flooded the floor with ice, intending to freeze everyone in place. He glanced back, expecting to see Izuku struggling, but he saw nothing. Looking for me? Todoroki looked up. Izuku was standing on a floating piece of rubble he'd created with creation, hovering 10 feet out in the air, using Urarka zero gravity. He was leaning back, hands behind his head. Too slow, Shoto. While you're playing with ice cubes, I'm already at the finish line. Izuku snapped his fingers. Teleportation. He appeared at the first obstacle, the Robo Inferno. A massive zero-pointer loomed over him. The other students were frantically trying to find a way around, but Izuku just landed on the robot's head. He didn't even use a quirk. He just stood there as the robot's sensors turned red. "You're a waste of materials," Izuku muttered. He reached down and touched the metal. Decay. The massive machine didn't just break, it disintegrated into a gray cloud of dust in seconds, the structural failure causing it to collapse on the robots behind it, clearing a path for only him and... By the time Izuku reached the final minefield, he was so far ahead that the cameras had to split screen just to show the rest of the class struggling with the tightropes. Bakugo was screaming, propelled by his explosions, and Todoroki was skating on a path of ice, both of them neck and neck for second place. They looked up to see Izuku standing at the edge of the minefield, looking at his watch. "Took you guys long enough," Izuku said, his voice carrying through the stadium's microphones. "Deku, I'm going to blow you to hell," Bakugo roared, diving toward him. Izuku didn't move until Bakugo was inches away. At the last second, Izuku's hair rose. Erasure. Bakugo's hands sputtered out. No sparks, no boom. Just the sound of him hitting the dirt face down at 40 miles per hour. Izuku stepped on Bakugo's head as he walked past, using the blonde skull as a literal stepping stone. "I told you I wouldn't use your quirk, Katsuki. I don't need it. I have something."
Exactly, Izuku said as he absorbed Todoroki's fire with Endeavor's Hellflame quirk. As Todoroki was shocked, so was the crowd, and especially Endeavor. Number 2 hero's quirk almost perfect 8 out of 10, but All Might I can't copy, but never mind, Izuku said as chains of fire burst out of the ground, chaining Todoroki down to the ground. "Do you give up?" Izuku said as Shoto's strained against the chains. The heat of the fire, his own fire, refined and weaponized against him, searing the edges of his gym uniform. He looked up at Izuku, his eyes reflecting the flickering blue and orange light. For the first time, the masterpiece looked truly fragile. I can't," Shoto choked out, the steam from his own evaporating ice making it hard to breathe. "You can't what? Win? We already established that," Izuku said, descending from his floating pedestal with a slow, predatory grace. He stopped just inches from Shoto's face, the heat from the stolen hellflame radiating off him in waves. "You're so obsessed with the origin of the flame that you forgot the flame itself doesn't have a name. It doesn't belong to your father, and now it doesn't even belong to you." Izuku snapped his fingers and the chains tightened. "Give up, Shoto, or I'll let these chains burn until there's nothing left but the smell of cooked perfection. Your choice, honor or survival." Shoto's head slumped forward. The heat of the fire on his left side flickered out, leaving only the damp, cold mist of his defeated right side. I forfeit." "Winner, Izuku Midoriya," Midnight shouted, though her voice lacked its usual flair. The crowd didn't roar this time. They whispered. They had just watched the most promising student in the school get dismantled like a toy.
Izuku waved a hand and the fire chains dissolved into harmless embers. He didn't offer Shoto a hand up. He didn't even look back as he walked toward the tunnel. "Clean yourself up, Shoto. You're dripping on the concrete," Izuku stated. And this is where we now jump cut to the finals, and before that happened, Izuku and Endeavor talked, and the room they were in would have gone into flames if Aizawa had not entered there. But now back to the finals, and the stadium was a powder keg. The final match was set, Izuku Midoriya versus Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo was already in the ring, his body vibrating with such intense fury that small pops of nitroglycerin were spontaneously detonating off his skin. He didn't have his gauntlets, they were banned for the tournament, but he had spent the last hour in the waiting room sweating a lot. While Izuku sensed something in Bakugo, it felt like a lot of power, but what was this? Izuku was wondering about this until Bakugo said, "Deku!" As Izuku got out of his thought process, as Bakugo continued for what he was about to say, and he was prideful today for some reason. "Just know, Deku, I have something that you will never have. I was chosen to get this, and with it you have no chance of beating me," Bakugo said loudly, while All Might sweated slightly, which no one saw, as we now do a flashback into the battle trail arc, and after it ended, and Bakugo being stopped by All Might, and after talking back and forth, All Might wanted Bakugo to be his successor, and frankly, All Might knew Izuku was not fully evil per se, but more or less just a bad person to be around. But if Izuku let his power get in his head, then there could be a new All for One, and frankly, All Might was afraid. And so he gave Bakugo One for All because he believed Bakugo could still change for the better if given enough time. And so in the following 3 weeks up to the UA Sports Festival, All Might trained Bakugo with Gran Torino's help, and this allowed Bakugo to already use 8% of One for All already. This is where the flashback ends, as All Might did tell Bakugo to keep secret about OFA. If he told Bakugo to stop, then it would get more suspicious, and knowing Izuku's high IQ and battle IQ, it would not take long after he did that for Izuku to connect the dots. So right now, all he can do is stay quiet as Bakugo rants on, and we now get back to the arena as Bakugo ranted about this new power it had, and when he was done, "And today, Deku, I will wipe that smug fucking smirk off your face," Bakugo said as he got ready, while Izuku's expression remained neutral as Midnight gave the go, and Bakugo instantly used One for All, 10%, not wanting to take any chance as he vanished in a blink of an eye. As Izuku was confused until he was hit with a 10% OFA boosted Howlitzer impact, as that sent him flying against the wall of the UA Sports Festival, as the wall broke, and above it where the crowd sat also broke a quarter of the way from that attack alone, as some of the civilians were about to fall until one of the heroes got them, as the stadium fell into a silence so profound it was deafening. The sheer scale of the destruction, the crumbled concrete, the screaming spectators, and the crater where the wall used to be left everyone paralyzed. In the VIP booth, the HESPC chairwoman stood up, her eyes narrowed. Nezu's teacup shattered in his paws. They weren't looking at the destruction, they were looking at Bakugo. The boy was wreathed in flickering orange bioelectricity, his skin glowing with red vein-like lines. It wasn't just explosion, it was something primordial. Did he kill him?" Kaminari stammered from the stands. "That wasn't Bakugo's power," Todoroki noted, his voice trembling. "That was a tectonic shift." From the settling dust and the wreckage of the outer wall, a low, rhythmic sound began to emerge. It was laughter, not a manic scream, but a dry, amused chuckle that sent shivers down the spines of everyone listening. As Izuku teleported himself back on the arena, his suit was torn as he ripped it off. "I see it.
Izuku said as he activated half of the quirks he has copied and teleported behind Bakugo and kicked him to the sky, and then teleported to where he kicked Bakugo and kicked him again and again, not giving Bakugo a chance to breathe, as Bakugo was getting very damaged until Bakugo used OFA again at 10%, getting behind Izuku, but Izuku expected that and dodged with levitation, getting his head out of the attack range as he kicked Bakugo down back to the arena floor, as chains of fire wrapped around Bakugo, immobilizing him and burning him at the same time as his went into flames for a fire attack. Hellflame, rush auto shot, Izuku said as bullets of fire stared hitting Bakugo, damaging and burning him at the same time as he was unable to dodge as it went on for a full 30 seconds, as Izuku stopped and teleported back down to the arena as the chains of fire dissipated as he looked at Bakugo. "Accept defeat, you can't beat me," Izuku said, his voice half serious, as Bakugo was barely able to stand as he was panting hard with many burn marks on his body. Bakugo's breath came in ragged, wet hitches. The smell of scorched fabric and singed hair filled the cratered remains of the stage. He looked like a man who had walked through the heart of a sun and barely made it out, but the orange sparks of One For All continued to dance across his skin, erratic and violent. I can't. Accept defeat? Bakugo spat a glob of blood onto the concrete, his eyes wide and bloodshot. You think a couple of burns are enough to stop me? I'm the one who's going to be the #1. I'm the one who was chosen. Bakugo roared, and the air pressure in the stadium shifted again. He wasn't just using 10% anymore. His body couldn't handle it. His muscles were screaming, but his pride was louder. 100% One For All. Bakugo knew this would make his arm get cooked, but right now, defeating Izuku is all he wants, and not because of his own damn pride, but because All Might believed in him, and that was enough for Bakugo to risk his life for anything. As Bakugo disappeared in a blink of an eye behind Izuku, as Izuku did not even have a second to realize until his body took a full 100% OFA boosted Howlitzer impact, as that sent him flying to the wall of the UA Sports Festival, as that segment of the wall and above that to where the crowd of civilians were sitting was almost destroyed as some of the civilians were about to, if not hero there helping them. The impact was absolute. A localized earthquake rippled through the stadium, and for a split second, the sun seemed to have descended onto the concrete. The shockwave was so violent that the sound didn't just reach the ears of the audience, it rattled their bones. Bakugo stood in the center of the devastation, his right arm hanging limp and mangled, the skin charred purple and his bones likely reduced to splinters from the recoil of 100% output. He was coughing up blood, his vision swimming, but he was grinning like a madman. I did it, he wheezed, the orange sparks of One For All finally flickering out as his body reached its limit. I crushed the monster. But then the dust began to swirl, not from the wind, but from a vacuum, as Izuku teleported himself back on the arena as blood was coming out of his chest, as he looked around until his eyes went around the entire crowd, as his chest injury started to heal, as right now Izuku's simple copy quirk had now awakened from the near-death attack he took from near death, but no one knew that, and Izuku was too focused to know himself. But the abilities that now came from it were extreme sensory abilities, quirk analyzation, where Izuku gets a description of any quirk he has or the person he looks at, and third is enhanced copy powers, which now allow him to copy now mutant quirks as well. As right now, Izuku's injury healed as he had copied a regeneration quirk of a civilian, as then Izuku teleported behind Baku